From 1980 to 2000, I led a team that compiled Media Network. We explored the background behind international broadcasting from the Second World War till the dawn of this millennium. Now it's time to share more untold stories with a second series, this time with a camera. Hello again. In episode 1, we visited the largest international radio archive on this planet. That was in September 2009. I kept in touch with its curator, Wolf Harranth, on and off, while my own career took an entirely different direction. But in May 2018, work took me to Linz in Upper Austria, and being so close, I looked up Wolf again. A lot had changed, and at the time of recording this episode, the entire future of the collection was uncertain. Their address had changed too. They were now in the industrial part of Vienna, where the Austrian Radio and Television, the ORF, keeps its logistics warehouse. So for what seemed like the last time, I met up with Professor Wolf Harranth for another installment of unique international broadcasting history.
Well, first of all, welcome to Documentary Archives Radio Communication here in Vienna. Happy to be with you. This is the basis of the medium wave mast of the Biesenberg transmitter in Vienna. It was the highest, largest building in Austria, 256 meters. And when they closed down medium wave, they simply blew it up. The mast.
Have you noticed how the general public always applauds when iconic transmitter towers come crashing down? I often wonder why.
So this is all that remains of that beautiful building. This is part of the guide wires, and this is the basis up here. This is all they needed, and up here the mast started.
This is where we are now.
This is where we are now. Last time we were just opposite Broadcasting House in Vienna.
That's right.
We had to leave those premises 9 years ago. And we will have to leave these premises end of the year. So this is kind of a farewell movie, farewell video.
So,
yeah.
Shall we inside?
So this is the day of taking down the mast. This is what we just saw before.
Yeah.
This is what we saw with the guy wires. This is the northern mast. This is the Biesenberg transmission site. And it was a sad moment for us because for all these years it was part of our daily broadcaster's life. And to see the thing crumble within seconds, it hurt. And this is on Biesenberg. And there is a new word in German, Biesenbergen, Biesenberging. Because one after another, all the other masts came down. Germany, France, wherever you go. We started the whole sad thing.
Yeah, because you were one of the first countries to stop using medium wave.
We were among the first countries to stop medium wave, unfortunately, until we took it up again. When there was the crisis in Yugoslavia, we took up medium wave again. Unfortunately, it was not the technicians, but the experts who did it. They started with 50 kilowatts, and then they became aware of the fact that this would probably not do, and they switched to shortwave with 50 kilowatts. And we broadcast all through the night in 5 languages. But not one after the other, but simultaneously. So you had 5 minutes of Croatian, 5 minutes of Albanian, and everybody who wanted to listen to us had to listen for 20 minutes until he got another 2 or 3 minutes. Were not too many, and these people didn't have batteries. They didn't have radios. So we sent them, the Austrian government, sent them some 3,000, 5,000 radios, but they didn't have batteries. So the government added batteries. And so they had a beautiful shortwave radio with batteries. All they needed to do was switch the oscillator a bit, and they had communications for their troops. So all those rivaling fractions didn't listen to Radio Austria, but they used these recorders and for their own purposes. Okay. We found out that 50 kilowatts is not enough, so we doubled it to 90 kilowatts. And they thought that probably this would make the programs twice as loud, which of course doesn't. And it was one of those regions where everybody broadcast. Radio Nederland and the Red Cross and the BBC and the Voice of America and even Adventist World Radio and what have you. And they all used local facilities because they were available. We broadcast from Vienna, Biesenberg. Nice remembering.
But that was on medium wave.
That was on medium wave first,
50,
and then 50, and then it was in shortwave. They took our European shortwave frequency, and for a couple of months we couldn't transmit to Europe because we had to transmit to Southern Europe.
And that was what, 6155?
This was 6155. Yes, incredible. Yeah.
Okay.
We lost practically all our audience in those months, but.
And when would that have been?
Don't ask me. I can't.
Well, we'll check.
We will check. We're an archive. We don't know anything. We check.
Okay.
Okay.
The Biesenberg transmitter site has gone. So too the foreign language broadcasts from Austria. But this footage from Moosbrunn, just south of Vienna, shows the enormous rotatable shortwave antenna is still there and apparently active. I last visited in 1976 while working for Austrian Radio.
Austrian Shortwave Panorama.
These shots by Max Berger, shortwave listener and fellow train enthusiast, bring back a lot of memories for me. Now back to Vienna.
This would be a good possibility to explain what we're doing. We have three main sections. The one is the history of Austrian radio. We'll probably come back to that a little bit later. International broadcaster, from the earliest day until, well, from dawn to dawn now, because international shortwave is, as we all know, going away, dying slowly. And the third thing is amateur radio. We are, in fact, the only institution dealing with amateur radio, not only as a technical development, but as an example of cultural, political, tactical development. And it's a mirror of society. Just consider what would an Ukrainian amateur who lives no longer in the Ukraine now, what would we feel? Is he a Russian? Is he Ukrainian? Is he allowed to operate or not? Why is there no amateur radio in North Korea? And so on. So this is why we deal with it. And here, for instance, you have one of these special collections. Every astronaut and cosmonaut in the space shuttle or in the International Space Station must also have an amateur radio license, because there are 3 million ground stations in case of emergency. Not really, but theoretically. And so we have a sample of each and every space mission, from the very first ones to the last ones. For instance, this is the very first missions, ST1, STS1, STS2. This is Owen Garriott.
Yeah.
He had a nice talk with JY1, King Hussein of Jordan. We have it on our website, But so this is typical example of one of the many special collections that we keep. So this is how amateur radios now, using satellites with these small cubes.
Yeah.
They are so small and so effective. So this is what we do.
Okay.
In all three channels. I might tell you this story. We once had a cosmonaut from Austria. And he, of course, was also expected to transmit via amateur radio. And we built 200 receivers, 100 in Russia, 100 in Austria, to receive the messages from there. And in the very last moment, they noticed that he didn't have an amateur radio license. The Austrians thought, a cosmonaut, what should he do? And the Russians said, no, everybody must have a license. So very shortly before they were for liftoff, he was going to Vienna to do his amateur radio examination. He was unprepared, and he was asked, like everyone else, he was asked a number of questions which he couldn't answer, so he didn't get his license. So we had 200 receivers, and we had a special call sign, Oscar Echo 0 Mir, and he couldn't transmit. So in the last moment, they built a Morse code transmitter, and this Morse code transmitter says, I am Mir, I am Oscar Echo 0 Mir. If you hear me, you will get a QSL card. That's the story of the only Austrian cosmonaut. This, of course, was on board the Mir. Only one of them went up, but they didn't know which one, and they didn't want to print 2 QSL cards, too expensive. So they put both of them on one card. He went up.
Which one? Vierbeck?
Vierbeck, yeah.
Yeah.
Vierbeck, yeah.
Okay.
So, every card is telling a story. Every document is telling a story. Yeah. And we simply try to collect all this material and make it available for generations to come. Because you know how it is. You would never believe that what you're doing today is history. Yes. And tomorrow you have no idea what you did yesterday.
No, that's part of history. Let me just... Yeah, there are quite a few videos on YouTube of this. Mm-hmm. Right, okay.
We have a nice video on the Mir program. Yeah?
Yeah.
When there were only 14 candidates left,
yeah,
one of them failed while jumping a wall, and when they examined him afterwards, it turned out that he had a severe heart condition, and he had to be operated immediately. Suppose what would have happened if he went up to space. That's how Austrians go into orbit. This is part of Austrian broadcasting history, and we're always happy to explain who was every country has its inventor. We have our own inventor of broadcasting. So he once performed beautifully, sang Erzherzog Johann Jodler. Transmission was bad and he couldn't sing very well, but he is our, this is what the first studio.
A radio pioneer.
A radio pioneer, yes, radio pioneer. So this is of course for students or visitors, just to explain. This is the second broadcasting house. It's practically all that they had there. This is the first transmission, and so on and so on and so on.
And when it started, it was called the RAVAG.
It was called RAVAG, Radio Austria Radio Verkehrsaktiengesellschaft, Radio Traffic Society. Yes, and it was this man. It was Oscar Jaya, who was the one who made it possible. He was quite a remarkable personality. I would have loved to meet him in person. I would have loved to meet him in person.
But why? Because
he was so dynamic at that time.
Yeah.
At that time, there were 13 or 14 people trying to get a concession. Yeah,
Right.
and he managed. And it's so difficult to understand today what it meant that 90 years ago, for the very first time in human history, one voice could talk to many. The real great development came when we built the Biesenberg transmitter site, Wien-Biesenberg transmitter. This is the historical transmitter. We are in 1931, 1932, 1933. Germany, Nazi Germany, broadcasts to Austria. My fellow countrymen, you will be soon part of your new great homeland, and so on and so on. And we, the Austrian fascists, thought they must have something to respond, and this is how they built this site. The very first one where the masts are the antenna, and we have a passive reflector mast. It was great innovation.
yes, in fact, WLW in Cincinnati, next to Bethany, had the same design.
Yes.
Because they thought they were going to get a license for 500 kilowatts, and they never got the license.
Okay.
But the antenna's still there.
And the problem with Austria is its geographical situation. It's an oval, and Vienna is just in one end. So with something going round and round and round wouldn't work. You need a reflector to reflect the signal to the rest of Austria. Yeah.
It needs to be a beam.
Yeah. Well, then in 1934, Nazis stormed the broadcasting house. It was in the city, in Vienna city, and they forced the people there to read a declaration of Nazi have taken over, and the Austrian government withdrew. It was the very first putsch of that, like that kind of. People were killed, were wounded. It failed. Why? Because Cheya managed to escape in the very last moment, and one of his technicians had a pistol, and they simply shot the transmitting wire. They capped the transmitting wire. Things like that happen. Okay.
So they weren't actually on the air? Is that true?
They were on the air, but only for a couple of minutes.
I see.
And well, only a few years afterwards, 1938, it really happened before the Anschluss, before Germany occupied. Very sad, though, he was killed during that putsch, but his successor, Schuschnigg, held the last message to the Austrian, saying, "God save Austria." And for the next years, we were part of the German Reich. Austria was so eventful. Austrian radio was so eventful. We invented, for instance, tönendes Papier, sounding paper, which is something like today's magnetic tape. It was what you had in the movies, in the cinema. There's this small strip, just the part that usually runs through the perforation. Here with paper, and they had machines to record everything. Toscanini only played for tönendes Papier because he could record up to 70 minutes. Lost and gone. Right. Not a single tape, not a single machine remained. Well, and then It's 1938. It's March 1938, and the Nazi come and occupy the old radio building, the old broadcasting house. And at the same time, the new one was almost finished. Incredible, 1935 to 1938 to build such a broadcasting house, believing that broadcast is the future, but also saying we are as big and as important as Hitler with his Haus des Rundfunks. We have our own Haus des Rundfunks. Yeah, but it was taken over by the Nazi immediately. This is where Hitler's bust stood in the entrance up to 1945. It was replaced by Stalin's bust until 1953, when somehow it disappeared. But when you entered the broadcasting house, you were either in front of Hitler or later on in front of Stalin. All these stories. After the war, Austria was divided in 4 occupation zones: American, French, British, and Russian. And Vienna was divided into 4 zones. And the four in the jeep, they drove through the inner city. They rotated every month, Russian, Britain. And broadcasting house was in the Russian sector, which means that Austrian government wasn't too happy, and they somehow managed to establish an Austrian radio. So every occupation force had its own radio station. The Americans had Red, White, Red Network, the British had Radio Alpenland, the French had Sendegruppe West, and the Russians only had the Russian hour within Radio Wien, within Radio Vienna. But the broadcasting house was in the Russian sector. So they control practically everything. We can see that later on. This is how it looked in 1945. Yeah. And this is when Cheya got in there with his own typewriter.
Can you explain?
In 1945, when everything was destroyed, Cheya, who of course was outed during the German part, he took his typewriter under the arm. He went in there, over all those rubble, up to his own old desk, wiped away, put up the typewriter, and sent his very first circular letter to those few remaining who had come back. But the problem was, transmitter, the Bismarck transmitter, was destroyed in 1945 by SS troops. So you had a broadcasting house, you had no transmitter, and you had no antenna. They took transmitter from an old U-boat, and they went through during the night, they went from house to house. You know, everything was in ruins. And they took the wires from the walls, and they put them together to build a line to a provisional antenna. And they started the very day when Austria's Second Republic was announced. Unfortunately, there was no car, no microphone for that demonstration. So they asked the new chancellor, excuse me, would you mind to come to the broadcasting house again? And in the broadcasting house, Chancellor Renner said, I herewith explain the Second Austrian Republic established. Sounded like original. This is Russian hour. And this, for instance, when you wanted to go there, you needed a passenger check, even to walk on the streets there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you could always go there, but you were never sure whether you would reach your destiny. It was Russian sound. And inside Ravak, you had this passport. I remember I was a little boy, and I worked with Austrian Radio since 1946 as a little boy. And there was a Russian soldier staying in front. He knew me, but I had to wait outside because I didn't have such a passport. Until somebody came, picked me up by the hand, and led me in the broadcasting house. Difficult times at that. Difficult times. Ravak was very innovative. We started shortwave in 1924, but not necessarily to transmit shortwave, but to have a connection between the car and the studio. And the car broadcast to Rosenhügel. And the very, very keen listeners, they found out where did we broadcast, and they listened to the transmission from the Sendeauto, from the transmission car, and they got their own special QSL card. We were very, very proud to broadcast on shortwave, probably with 100 or 200 watt, but at that time it meant something. And then, of course, we were not allowed to be on the air between 1938 and 45, and we used facilities of telecommunication until this was the first broadcasting house of shortwave after 1945. Argentinierstraße, yes, just opposite the proper Funk house. Yeah, and then we acquired Moosbrunn, and one by one built up the station. Yes, and we transmitted until 2003, when our government decided shortwave was no longer needed. And the management of ORF thought, well, if the government says it was no longer needed. And we closed down. We were among the very first ones to close down shortwave. Others to follow much later. That's the way it is.
Who is this?
This is Oscar Chea. And we got this picture on loan. It was in a very poor condition. We found out who was the artist, and above all we found out when it was done, because this is when the second mast of Biesenberg was set up, so it must have been after 1935 and of course before 1938. It's the only portrait of Oscar Chea that remains, and we are very, very, very sorry that we have to.
He is Austria's radio pioneer.
He is Radio Austria pioneer. The national section of our collections is called Oscar Chea Gedichtesfond, in memory of Oscar Chea. So he's our godfather, and therefore I'm very, very sorry that this is probably the very last time that we look at him. He will be taken to a depot somewhere. But this is part of one of our many exhibitions, and we can only put up a few of them here. Here's another one. This is from Voxhaus in Germany. Voxhaus in Germany was the first German program. They started half or 3/4 of an hour earlier than the Austrians did, and since everybody could listen to Berlin, they wanted to listen to Austria.
Got you. Good.
Okay. Well, we could go on like this.
Yeah.
This is there will be no end to it. Okay.
This is the last chance.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, yes.
But you've also collected material from the United States as well.
We have material from all over the world. As I told you, one of our sections is Austrian, national, and the other one is international broadcasting. International does not necessarily mean international stations. International means foreign from Austrian point of view, and these are very interesting things. They are forerunners of QSL cards. When you listen to a radio station, this is from, doesn't say from when, about early 30s, and you send a reception report, the station will thank you with a letter or card and an echo stamp with their call sign. This is KTHS, Hot Spring National Park, Arkansas. And you could collect these stamps. You could, you see, there were an album. There were albums for them, and we
For reception stamps.
yeah, reception stamps. Yeah, there were two companies that really sold them, Bryant Radio and Echo.
And were the stations interested in getting? I mean, they
The
wanted reports.
the station wanted reports, and listeners wanted
Thank you.
a thank you. And this is also the QSL card, the forerunner of the QSL card. And of course, if you could offer a full album with nothing, we have about 250 of them, which is a good collection.
Okay.
No, there's
And,
this.
and those stamps
Yeah.
were issued by a publisher? Or?
These stamps were issued by Echo O'Brien companies,
Okay.
and you bought the station bought them, printed the station call sign, and gave them away.
I see.
Yeah, great thing.
The American Banknote Company.
Yeah, the first broadcasting stations in the United States. Oh, by the way, United States, we have about 34,000 historic audios from old-time radio. You can go to our website and find a list of all them. They are not online, of course, due to all kinds of legal restrictions, but they are available. And for people who for someone who started Tarzan, or the development of soap operas, or the 21st years of Bing Crosby, or whatever, we are the ones to offer sound tips. Yeah. Where did you have a radio station? In a hotel or in a garage?
Okay.
Yeah, wherever they. And this, for instance, is a very interesting one. It's from 1936. National Broadcasting Company launched a stratosphere balloon transmitter, 1935 it is, and used that as an antenna. Early experiments, yeah. There is so much to tell.
Yeah, and they were using shortwave by the look of it.
Yeah.
13050.
What else?
And 8 watts of power.
Where would you suppose world's first labor broadcasting station to have been? Labour.
Okay.
Not in the UK. No.
Australia.
Australia. In Sydney.
I see, okay. 2K watt.
And of course, everyone who has QSL cards from pre-war QSL cards, early cards, is very proud of them. There are not so many. This is Hiroshima in 1932. Well, this is amateur radio, so it's all mixed up.
Okay.
Laura is just working with our broadcasting cards.
Yeah.
The same way as amateur radio amateurs swap QSL cards broadcasting stations offer QSL cards, reception reports, reception confirmations to reception reports. Nowadays, it's not so difficult. If you want to know how you sound in Nepal, you just go to Nepal and listen to your own station.
But this is all pre-internet and yeah.
But now, at that time, pre-internet or whatever, you wanted to know whether you have a listener up there,
Yeah.
and how were the conditions.
Yeah, because shortwave reception was very variable depending on all sorts of conditions.
On all
like
sorts, on all,
sunspots.
on all sorts of conditions, and we were happy if we had a listener to tell us, of regular listeners, and they were given these beautiful QSL cards. This is from Christmas Everywhere, Spy Kids Co. This is a
Pirate.
pirate, a British pirate, yes, sponsored by McDonald's. Sunshine Radio International. Well, they had their own QSL. They usually broadcast on weekends. They set up a transmitter somewhere in the woods. Worked for an hour or two until they were detected.
Yes.
And before the authorities could come, they closed down and were gone. This is Ελληνική ραδιοφωνία τηλεόρασης, Greek radio and television, the voice of Greece.
I can even hear the sound of the
We all can hear the sounds of all the radio stations. It was our pride to know when you went up and down the events, and you da 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 da. Ah, you know where you are. You're South Africa.
Radio RSA.
Radio RSA, yes. All gone. All gone. Only Laura is still here, and Laura is dealing with all those old Radio Free Europe.
Yeah.
You remember
in English garden?
in Munich?
Yes,
Radio Free Europe in Munich, yeah. The Bell of Freedom, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Wherever you go, Deutsche Welle.
Yeah.
Deutsche Welle. This is from Werdachtal, the German transmitter. They had a transmitter in Malta, in Sri Lanka, everywhere. Closed down everything.
Yeah, and the thing about Deutsche Welle that was interesting was the fact that they tended to build transmitter sites, and a few years later there was always a coup or some particular problem.
Elephants in Sri Lanka.
Yes,
in Malta, even in Malta, they lost their own transmitter. Yeah. And it was at a time when pre-internet, in a time when if you wanted to have a good signal, you needed a relay station. In the beginning, you set up a relay station with a very good receiver, and you received the signal, and you somehow doctored it and transmitted it again. And then later, of course, we had the first satellites. Discs, American forces had big, we can see one, big discs with an hour of material on them. Transcriptions sent by plane, and only the news had to be read, and the news were fed by teletyper. Incredible. Then we started to swap. Why build another transmitter? You use ours, we use yours, and then we started to take them all down. Germany didn't broadcast from Germany for the past 10 years,
That's right.
and they usually turn on the last transmitting site. You won't find anything flat.
Yeah, it's all gone.
It's all gone.
It's as though it never existed.
Yeah.
And Wechtertal, was that the last one?
Werdachtal, yeah.
That was the last one that they...
It was Jülich and Werdachtal, but the last ones they took down, yeah.
And
What happened to Flavor?
Yeah, also gone.
All gone.
And
all
gone very, very quickly. Yeah.
We are here to keep the memory. We can tell stories on each and every of these of these stations and transmitters. This, for instance, is a Voice of America card, a verification card from Biblis, Germany, relay station.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
This is the Voice
It's
of
incredible.
America,
Wherever-
Washington, D.C.
They needed to get
Signing
close.
off.
Munich
Yep.
relay.
Can
That-
you show me that once again?
which one? That one?
Yeah, the Munich.
This is the Munich card, or one of the Munich cards. Want to see a logbook? This is a nice one. 1924.
Okay, April 30th, Hilversum.
And Eiffel Tower. We don't know. It looks like Mr. Levage, something like that.
Oh, but he lived in the UK.
He lived in the UK.
Right.
Burnham on Bromley Coach in Essex. Königswusterhausen, Hilversum, Berlin, Zurich, Stockholm, Toulouse, Belfast. He got everything. Breslau, Münster, Newcastle, Hamburg, everything. In the German Democratic Republic, amateur radio, for obvious reasons, was not allowed. In the German Democratic Republic, for obvious reasons, they needed radio operators. And of course, they also wanted to be in the international amateur radio sporting scene. So what to do? Finally, because everybody was working via West Berlin, clandestine, finally they allowed amateur radio. There's the law in 1917, I believe. Anyway, they had to start from scratch. So they needed teachers. And they were looking for anti-fascist, socialist, communist radio teachers. Good. The first 1,600 names were in a so-called Kladde, where between 1953 and 1962 they had a list of all the licenses.
So these were approved people.
These were all of the 1,600, the first 1,600 amateurs in Germany, and on page one, of course, the trainees, the trainers. Now, this Kladde was very sensitive when the DDR crumbed, and the Deutsche Amateurradio Club took over. He suggested this should be burned, so it was burned into Vienna, and we kept it. And when we took a look, we opened the first page, and all these names are so familiar to us. And here's just one example: Wolfgang Rach. He was indeed among the very, very first German amateurs. And Wolfgang Rach went up all his way until he became part of the DRSD, the German organization, where he was in charge of frequency management. And he, of course, was a super Nazi. He couldn't have had such a position. Up to 1945, they were true Nazis because they couldn't operate otherwise.
Yeah. Okay.
And from 1945, they were everything. They were West Berlin or German or DDR, true followers, and they could do so because they would not betray each other. Right. Everybody knew everything about everyone, because in 1945, the DISD headquarters burned down and took all documents with them. And what we did was go from one archive to the next, or ask all the old-timers. And so we have a complete set of all the old bulletins with all the names of those who were true believing Nazis And later on, because they were such nice Germans, they got the Bundesverdienstkreuz. Okay? Now, what we are doing in this respect is we are collecting all the GDR cards, 150,000, something like that, and one by one checking them against what was officially published, finding out the system according to the call signs who were part of the Stasi, of the Secret Service. Yeah. Because the people over there in the headquarters, they must know, is he just an operator or does he belong to us? Mm-hmm. And so the system was changed from time to time. And what we are trying to find out is to find out the scheme of that so that we know who was, I must tell you the story. In East Germany, broadcast listeners were not allowed to listen to international stations. They couldn't really prevent it, but they didn't allow a listeners' club to be formed. The only listeners' club was Radio Berlin International for their own shortwave, international shortwave service, and German citizens could not become members of that club. Okay. So once somebody suggested he would form a listeners' club, a German Democratic Radio Listeners' Club. And indeed, 4 people applied and they met. And they had a clandestine meeting. They did not know that the people inviting was from the Secret Service. But he didn't know that the other 3 were also from the Secret Service. All 4 of them were from the Secret Service, but they didn't know that they were just friends. 4 different reports, and then it turned out it was all our own business. That's GDR. This one, for instance.
The radio station.
These are all, we're just in the amateur radio system again. Part of why they had to allow amateur radio was they all used fictive call signs and sent their QSL cards via West Berlin, which was, of course, impossible for GDR. And this is a sad story. But you see, this is Deutsche Demokratische Republik.
Yeah.
It's prison.
Yeah.
It is a call sign.
Yeah.
And then this QSL card was received by a number of other stations. There's a confirmation of contacts that never took place. It was propaganda. It was clandestine. GDR is a prison.
Okay.
Using an invented call sign.
I see, okay.
But it was an invented call sign that really did exist. And the holder of that call was, of course, had lots of difficulties because nobody believed that he was innocent.
Oh, I see. So they're using it for propaganda purposes.
Yeah.
And then, but you say DL8 AAM?
Yeah, you can't stop a radio amateur from transmitting. And if he's not allowed to do it legally, he will do it illegally, unless, as we say, unlicensed. And they used fictive call signs, but you could recognize them. And they were sent by West Berlin, because amateurs in West Berlin, of course, were happy for political agitation of that kind. So this led them finally to accept amateur radio. But here's a good example. Let me show you. We have about 50 or 60,000 documents from the ministry, from state security, from the Ministry for Staatssicherheit. And here, for instance, is a report from Eisenach. We have presently in Eisenach 15 radio amateurs. 6 of them are in official unofficial spies. And to be on the safe side, the family of all of them, the families and relatives of all them are consistently under observation. Now you have 15 amateurs, and 6 of them are spies. Isn't that incredible? These are the very, very oldest cards from the Netherlands, as I see. They start with the early 30s. But we have here, for instance, this is a very old prefix. The card is dated 12 November, but it doesn't say which year. But many of these cards, most of these cards are 80 and almost 90 years old. Well, this is Nicole. She is working with one of the book scanners. We have a couple of book scanners to scan difficult originals. And we are doing about 120,000 sheets a year. Just scanning them doesn't mean much. You must research them, making them available. Book scanners are very important because you could never scan a book like this with a regular scanner. And we cannot afford these very expensive automatic machines. These ones are expensive enough, but we can scan a book like this within a day, which is a good achievement. So you are here in the room with the Jasme Colvin's collection.
So I have to ask, who is Jasme?
Yes, yeah, who is Jasme and who is... Jasme was the ship of one of the pioneers of amateur radio day expeditions, Danny Wheel. Jasme was indeed 3 ships. There were 3 Jasmes. He set them all aground. And in order to circulate his QSL cards, there was the Jasme Foundation. And in that Jasme Foundation, when Danny Will stopped doing, were Lloyd and Iris Colvin. Lloyd and Iris Colvin, he was American stationed in Germany and then Japan. They made amateur radio their lifetime hobby. They traveled to more than 240 countries, and wherever they were, they had amateur stations set up. And in fact, they worked more than 1 million stations.
Good, great.
And this is their own collection. These are small files. Whenever one was complete, they just put up another one. And let me see if there are any P8 or SP. Suppose a Dutch amateur radio. Suppose a Dutch radio amateur worked them. Mr. Watermulder worked them on SV9 Crete. And he received their card from Crete. Or let's have a look here. Gerrit van der Vlucht worked them in Djibouti.
Okay.
So this is all their cards. Sometimes people come and say, I worked at the Colvins in 1972 from there. Do you have my card? And then I can show them his or her card, and they are very, very happy. There are 80,000 radio amateurs in the United States. There is not a single amateur on rock all. Which, by the way, is not an individual country, but there are countries, they are not inhabited, or there is no radio amateur. Now, if you are a keen DXer, which means you're trying to establish contacts with as many countries in the world as possible, you want, of course, to have a card from everywhere. How can you get a card from Saint Nowhere if there is no amateur in Saint Nowhere? Yeah, there is a possibility. All you need is somebody who goes there for a week or for a fortnight, puts up a station, and then says, this is radio ST5SA from Saint Nowhere. Now you can get his card, add that country to your DXCC list. DXCC is the international program where you try to work as many stations of the world, as many countries of the world as possible.
And when did this really start taking off? I mean, when did people start
Yeah. This is something. Would you have half an hour, half a year to discuss it?
Okay.
Is a DXer somewhere? Is an expeditioner somewhere? Yeah. Someone who goes there because it's on business, and he's just there for a day or two, or for a week or two? Or is it expeditioner of someone who goes there on purpose, preparing the trip, preparing a license, whatever you have? There are expeditions nowadays, they cost up $500,000. And there wouldn't be another expedition in the next, there wasn't one in the last 25 years. And there wouldn't be another one in the next 10, 15 years. So everybody, all the millions of, try to get hold of them. And this is the business real.
And presumably the people who organise them must have quite a lot of money, or at least ways of raising money.
They must be good in raising money. Yes. But if I just need Desecheo to complete my DXCC program, and there wasn't an expedition in Desecheo for the last 20 years, I would give my $50 to them. In the early 30s, it was a real achievement to have a contact confirmed with another country. And if you had 10 or 15 or 20, or even overseas, you were very proud. This is when the DXCC was invented. The DX Century Club, a virtual club of all those who have confirmed at least 100 countries. Nowadays, you can work at the DXCC within a weekend. Okay. After 1945, it was re-established, but during the war, amateur radio was forbidden. So they restarted the DXCC, and who was the first one to send in an application? A German. It was impossible that a German would not receive the DXCC #1. So they sent him a letter. Is this card true? And we cannot really find out who was he and who were they, waiting for an American to apply, so that American could get the #1, the German got #2.
What's going on here?
We must be able to digitize every kind of material. Christoph is just working on a project where you have paper and voice and everything, and of course also positive and negative dias film, and we must do that as well. So we can operate. This is data input room.
Right. Okay.
Where we can operate with all kind of.
So where do you get your material from?
Part of it comes from Austrian Radio. It's their own material, and since we have the equipment and the know-how, We cooperate with them, or they cooperate with us in a very, very fun, very nice way. And we digitize their material, and we offer our material for their archive. So we cooperate in the archives. And most of it is donations. 1,500 individual donors. Some of them send a card, another one sends a box. A lorry comes and it is a great thing, but it's at the same time it is a burden. We are 8 people here now, and we're still unable to cope. This, for instance, is just cards from Austria and Switzerland.
Right.
Cards that have not yet been
Put into the system. And whilst we're waiting, another one, the next batch comes and comes and comes, and this is just small part of what gets in. And sometimes you get a collection of, say, 10,000 cards, and you find just 2 or 3 of them, which you really need. Yeah. And then you get just a small box with 20 cards. All of them extremely important. So that's the way it is. And we must of course decide what is more important. And that's interesting.
That's a shortwave listener.
A shortwave listener's card. Okay.
A shortwave listener's card from the early 50s. It's a blank card. We have his collection.
Yeah, I see.
And this is a blank card. Well, all these
because not everybody had a license.
Not everybody had a license, and there were shortwave receiving, shortwave listeners, SWL. Yeah. What are you scanning now?
Now I'm scanning the Portish maps. In the case of the other room, it were photos of the destroyed Vienna 1945.
And this obviously are records of a conference. We can...
I think it's Karl Kraus.
Ah.
No, it's not Karl Kraus. In that case, it's the Partei.
Party Convention 1932.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of the Social Democrats.
Yeah, left-winged.
Social Democrats.
Okay.
1932. Now, this is only part of it. Hugo Portisch is a journalist.
Yeah.
A very well-known journalist, and he invented what you nowadays call these documentaries.
Okay.
About Austrian history. You must consider that in schools, Austrian history ended sometimes 1900 or so. Whatever came afterwards was not too good to him. And he did a series, he did 3 series of TV documentaries. Austria #1, First Republic, Austria 2, Second Republic, up to the State Treaty, and Austria 3, Austria 2, second part, current Austrian history. It was an immense success. If you have 2 or 3 million listeners in a country of 8 million. So it took him years to produce these documentaries, and in the course of these years, he assembled and collected research documents, every kind of document. Perhaps we just saw Socialist Party 1932. Perhaps if he mentioned it at all, he would say, that party, Mr. So-and-so said this and that, 10 seconds. And he set up an incredible file of 380 documentation of 380 big files with all difficult kinds of originals. And we are digitizing.
Difficult because
the stuff You have
not easy to scan.
it's not easy to scan. You have a poster. You have a large side poster, and you have diaphragms, and they have things like that, and you have all very old. Du hast keine Handschuhe, okay? Yeah, no gloves.
Versus gloves. It's about the haptic, and it's easier to rip off paper with gloves.
If you want to reproduce this part, only these two lines, in a way that you can OCR them, so make them text readable. This is a huge task, and we can do this with these special machines because we have a machine for everything. He was just taking photographs, negatives, dear negatives, but large size. Where do you get them?
So this all looks familiar.
Yeah, welcome to the mess. This is our studio, and if you ever saw a professional recording studio, in the broadcasting house, we know how these things look. But you would not find just that recorder that you need for this or that type of tapes or discs. Over there, this is one of the American Forces discs. They are a larger size as usual, and they start from inside out. So if you don't have the proper machine for them, you can't even play it.
You know why they went from the inside out?
Yeah, to prevent that everybody else, that the ordinary people could operate them. If you have to repeatedly find a certain second of the disc, you can always.
Yeah.
You can do it nowadays with every disc jockey's machine.
Yeah, that's right. But in those days,
But do it with all shellacs. We have a collection of old diesel-eaten shellac discs. They were done in the late 30s and early 40s. You could play them only once or twice.
So tell me a bit about the tapes I can see in the background, because I see Radio Taipei International.
Oh well, this is just part of the archive. We have a couple of thousand tapes.
Right.
Still, a broadcaster in a broadcasting house, you will find 1 million.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't find, say, 20 years of radio in Taiwan.
Okay.
So this is station intervals, 60,000 station intervals.
Yeah, because you used to put them out on cassette, on the green cassettes.
Yes, we had a few of them on cassette, and we stopped collecting them. We simply couldn't cope. But where would you find Radio Albania in the late 50s? If not here. Whatever is here would not exist any longer if it wasn't here. During the year, whenever something important happened, you took a recording. No problem nowadays. You go to the files. You can have everything. At that time,
you were the only person doing it.
We were the only person doing it.
Yeah.
And we were doing it so very often.
Media Wars is there as well.
No, well.
That must be us.
This must be us. Yes. This is all done.
Okay.
Shall we go to the cellar?
Yes.
Friedrichshafen will have typical example. We go to the Friedrichshafen Hamvention in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. Now the theme of the expedition this year is scouting, radio scouting. We have a collection of about 2,000 scouting cards.
Okay.
So we just took a few of them for our exhibition there. It's Wireless Institute of Australia, 1934. Worked the British Empire.
1955.
1945. Württembergischer Radio Club. Before, this was from the French zone. We have 60,000, 70,000, don't know, awards, diplomas. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. This was your shack, wasn't it?
This was my shack in younger days. We should have teared that down, but we keep it for memories. All you have here, whatever you have here, is to change such a small.
Yeah. This is about what, about 9. I remember seeing this when I was. It must have been sort of 78, 79, something like that.
You've been there in this old shack, yeah. 1947. Oh, that's a good one, because there you can see names of the actors. All you need to do is find out who was it, and find his biography 50 or 60 years later. He was a star at his time, and now almost gone. Yeah, that's it. This is the treasure ward of the treasure house. We are in the treasure ward of the treasure house. And this is where things start, and this is where things end up. If we get new stuff with new material, it will be put down here, will be registered, will be taken up, will be researched, and finally it will come back to its archive resting place.
Because it's never thrown away.
We made it a principle never to throw away anything. We had, in a certain way, to do it. We run out of place, and if of a special, say, QSL card or copy of a magazine, once you have 20, 30, 50 copies of the same edition of the magazine, we ask donors whether they would allow us to either pass it on to another archive, or get rid of it. Simply, it doesn't make sense if you have a box of 1,000 cards and it's 10 cards 100 times.
True. Okay, so you.
But we never give away a document if the donor says, I want my collection to be kept completely. We would, in case of doubt, keep a document, although we know we would probably never need it. But the document you need must be there. Not the documents that are there, not the documents we have are important.
Right.
Important is that we have that one document that you need at that time when you need it.
That's right, That's definitely. So, so what have you got down here? Is it mainly
all kinds.
Of documents,
And
it's huge.
Yeah, it is. It is huge, and still, it's a question of money as well. When you see, here, this is one donation. Wow. This is one donation. We are always needing money. We live entirely on donations and on jobs, and professional jobs that we do for Austrian Radio, because we have the equipment and the know-how, and we can work with sensitive and secret papers and material. So we always need money, and if you see cards in shoe boxes here, and it hurts me, a shoe box, an archive box, a special material, it's just €5, not much. But if you need 1,000 of them, where do you get them? That's the problem. Okay, so this is filed QSL cards, amateur radio QSL cards. They are a treasure and they are a burden. We are the only ones to keep them. Now, suppose you are broadcast listener, or radio amateur, or collector of magazines, related magazines. You're in the 80s now, and you must go to some place, or you're getting blind, you can't afford it any longer, or you died. And now the widow comes and says, this is my husband, my late husband's work of his whole life. Please give it a home. And this is what we do. People send us their, I don't know how you call it in English, concessions. We will get their donations, bequests.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah? Legacies, whatever you have. And we feel obliged to honor all these things, yeah, all these applications. And the problem is that this house, this hall, will be taken down end of the year, and we do not know yet where to go with an office where you need so many rooms and desks and machinery. And with an archive of such dimensions,
Value. Yeah.
of great value, but
Difficult to define.
big space, and where is a sponsor that tells you I have a climatized storage space of 500, 600 square meters. I can offer you 8 rooms for your office.
But what would be the ideal solution? That you'd be able to stay here?
The ideal solution would be to be able to stay here, but I see a little chance. There is a decision that this will have to be taken down, make room for a new one, or whatever it is. We are guests here,
Right.
so we are guests, so we cannot claim anything. The ideal solution would be a room like this, or a hall like this, or somewhere in a factory, whatever it is, like this, and an office room for 8 people, and the studio.
Not too far from Vienna.
It should be in Vienna. It must be in Vienna. It must be within reach of public transport. This is what we have here. You can go here, but it takes an hour by public transport to come here from the city center. And we lost lots and lots and lots of students. They used to come by between 2 sessions in the morning or in the afternoon, check something. The editor of a reporter's broadcasting house, they just crossed the street to check with our material. So this is one of the essentials. Even today, when you digitize everything. But I tell you, the document that you need, that's the one that hasn't been digitized yet. Sometimes it works. I remember a few days ago, Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen, ZDF. We are in a meeting. We have a problem. We know, we look for a certain article. We know it is published in somewhere in August or September, either in 1962 or 1964, sometimes, and it was dealing with a whole station was called ABC or CDA. It was written by a man called Meyer or Müller or Berger, something like that. You have all this stuff, can you help us? And while he was talking, the girl that is in charge was already going through the archive and said, do you mean, could it be this and that and that? Yes, that's the one. Okay, where do you want to have it? Can I give you an email address? Yes, please give me the email address. Oh, there it is, during that same phone call.
This story has a happy ending. As you heard at the time of the recording in May 2018, it wasn't clear whether the team at Dokufunk might have to move again. But then, in late 2019, came the official recognition they'd been waiting for, which means longer-term financial security. So after 35 years at the head of this giant archive project and 73 years as a radio professional, Wolf Harranth retired. He handed over to Paulina Petri, OE1 YPP, and she's already had several years of experience with the collection, including over 9 million QSL cards. Now that they've moved upstairs from the ground floor, there was a chance to remodel things from scratch. So I'm sure you'll join me in wishing them all the success in the world, because a lot of important work still needs to be done. And in 2021, Wolf Harranth will celebrate 80 years. Wolf, it's been an honour to know you. Celebrate with Gisela. A superb job. Well done.